The path to mastery leads through the heart of adversity. Challenge is the raw material from which courage and strength are forged. Warriors are not defined by events. Warriors define them. Warriors conquer themselves before all else. Warriors are relentless in their service to others. Join us as we open our hearts and hone our minds to a razor's edge. It doesn't matter how slow you go, only that you do not stop. Your time is now. And now your host, Jason McKenzie.
As I was recording a podcast yesterday, I was having a great conversation with a guest, and I'll release a podcast this week, but I was struck by the fact that my interviewing skills, I guess, have gotten, or my conversationalist skills have gotten better as I've done the podcast, which is great. I mean, I still have a long way to go. And typically the way I'm wired is nothing is good enough. But what I wanted to talk about today was one of the reasons that I've gotten better. And that has to do with getting a really important piece of feedback, probably at the right time, from the right person. And I wanted to give a shout out to that person because they'll probably be pretty surprised. And I also wanted to give you some insight into not only how my mind works, but probably to how many of our minds work and why we are so afraid of putting ourselves out there and getting feedback. Because even though I'm a person who encourages people to give me feedback, sometimes I don't take it very well, or I don't take it well right away, and it requires a whole lot of thinking about it. So to process it and to put it into use and, figure out what it means to me and how I want to apply it and all those kind of things. So one of the interesting things about doing a podcast is that you get to hear yourself after. So you do these unscripted conversations with people, and then you get to listen to it after. I don't listen to all my podcasts, but I listen to a fair amount of them because I want to hear how the interview went. I want to see if there's any opportunities for improvement. So anyways, when you do that, you tend to pick up these idiosyncrasies that you didn't know you have. Like my kids do this to me quite frequently where they point out all these weird things I do that I'm not even aware of. And I think as we get older, we get a little more quirky, let's say, and those idiosyncrasies tend to increase over time. But anyways, one of the things that I tended to do as a podcast conversationalist, let's say, was I tended to say, oh, that's interesting, like so many times. And I would listen to it and I would just be totally cringing. I'm like, okay, never say that's interesting again. That was my task, right? And I kept doing it. And then one day, this guy I know, whose name is Nick Elkins, and I'll tell you a little bit about Nick in a minute here, but he reached out to me and he goes, hey, do you mind if I give you some feedback on the podcast? And I was like, no, man, of course, go ahead. And he goes, you say that's interesting a lot, but the way that you say it tends to sound insincere because you say that's interesting and then you move on to the next thing right away. And it feels like you're just saying that's interesting to kind of stop the conversation and shift the subject. And I know you're not being insincere because I know you, but that's what it comes across as. And I want to tell you, obviously I thanked Nick and we had a little dialogue about it, but I want to tell you actually what went on in my mind, okay? Because I think this is insightful and it's me being a little bit vulnerable, but it's also me explaining how the process of, self-reflection and self-awareness and all that kind of stuff works in my own head. So the first thing I thought was, oh my God, I suck. Because I always feel like what I'm doing is not good enough. Okay, that's just, if you listen to some of the podcast episode, I think there's some genetic reasons why that is the way it is. And I'll link to episode 33 where you can have a listen to this conversation. But regardless, so when someone gives me feedback like that, like Nick did, it immediately confirmed in my mind all of the things I already believed about myself. Like I'm not good enough, and now I'm coming across as insincere. And what the hell, I'm trying to come across as always being sincere. And what if I'm sending the wrong message to people? And oh my God, why am I even doing this if I suck so bad? Like all of these thoughts went in my head. And I think it's part of the reason, one of the reasons people don't want to receive feedback is because having those thoughts are uncomfortable. Now, also in this community that Nick and I are a part of, I am I would say I'm seen as a somewhat of a leader in that community. I've been around it for a long time. I think I've helped a fair amount of guys. I've made myself available to, for a lot of coaching calls and that kind of stuff. And And I run mastermind groups with guys in that community and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I would say I'm seen as somewhat of a leader. And Nick is one of these guys who is just crushing it, absolutely crushing it. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but I had a coaching call with Nick like quite a while ago. And it was one of his first times that kind of, maybe I don't want to take credit for it, but I think that conversation we had set him down the path of joining this men's group, the Dad Edge Alliance, and, really turning his life around and actually absolutely taking ownership. So I'm going to be totally honest here and say there was a part of me that was actually concerned that my sucking so bad at being a podcast host would put my leadership street cred, I would say, at risk in this group, right? Because I've worked a long time to cultivate it. And part of it is me being seen as, kind of not always having my shit together, because I lean into the group too, but like being really good at everything I do. And this is all made up narrative in my own head, right? So those are all the things that went on in my head. And I'm thinking, oh my God, like, is Nick, this guy who I had this amazing coaching call kind of way back at the beginning of his journey, is he going to think I'm some kind of think less of me because I'm no good at doing a podcast and blah, blah, blah. And so, but that's only the initial. So first of all, I can't thank you enough, Nick, for taking the time to give me that feedback. But what I want to be clear about is that initial discomfort that comes from receiving feedback like that is totally temporary. Because then what happens is I can't even tell you how much time I spent thinking about that. And not just thinking about like the fact that I say that's interesting, but about being more self-aware when I'm in these conversations with people and trying to find the perfect mix between like unscripted, but bringing intention to it too, and finding ways to incorporate the lessons that I'm learning in a way that, makes the conversations better, makes the final product that I'm offering better. And so I spent an incredible amount of time thinking of it. And what ended up happening was I've stopped saying that's interesting, but I've become much more self-aware in the moment about the words I'm using, how the conversation is flowing, how I could potentially guide the conversation. But it all came from Nick having the courage and the compassion and generosity to give me the feedback that was hard for me to hear in the first place. And Nick doesn't actually know any of this. This is the first time he's going to hear this. But that's the frickin' beauty of it, right? And it seems so like this beautiful virtuous circle, because I have a coaching call with this guy. He ends up on this path of like constant self-improvement, like just absolutely relentless. He's bringing, he's got this band of brothers around him. He's pushing forward. He's doing things he's never done in his life. And then he turns around and helps the guy, returns the favor, I guess, and helps the guy that helped him also become better, do more, self-reflection and all of those things. And that's what is so friggin' beautiful about working, like spending time in an environment with a group of guys who are open and honest and supporting each other. So I think that's really all I wanted to talk about, was just that I wanted to give you some insight into how Mr. Vulnerability here, how I took that feedback and how the benefits and the wisdom in the feedback. I mean, I could logically hear it right away. Like, yeah, okay, that's great, man. You're right. I got to stop saying that's interesting. In fact, it was something I already knew. But how over time, with lots of thought and navel gazing and implementation and execution and doing it again and again and again, how that feedback is actually going to, I think it's a gift that will continue, that I will continue to receive over time, because it actually changed how I, hold these podcast conversations. And you can't put that genie back in the bottle. So that one piece of feedback is something that will continue to yield benefits to this podcast, to me, to my guests, to the mission of Mental Health Warriors forever. And I mean, that is a huge, huge gift. So Nick, man, I just wanted to say thank you thank you. Thank you. I can't even tell you how much I appreciate what you gave to me. And I also want to say congratulations, man, because your evolution and transformation is powerful. It's inspirational. I'm glad to call you a friend, and I can't wait to see what the future has in store for you. So that's the message for today, guys, is that, man, when you put yourself out there, you got to get ready to get uncomfortable, but it's in that discomfort that magic happens. It's in that discomfort that growth happens. And surround yourself with a higher caliber of people. I'm going to do a podcast episode on this, I think, just me talking, because I used to think the idea of getting a higher caliber of people in your life, or people that were hungry and more aligned with your core values and the vision that you want to create for your life, I didn't know how to do that. And it is so easy nowadays. It's ridiculous. So I had a very limiting point of view about what was possible as it came to improving the quality of the people in my life. And I want everybody to understand just how not only how easy it is. I mean, it takes work, but the mechanics of it are easy. But also how profoundly life-changing it is, because it changes everything. So that's the message for today. So thank you to Nick Elkins, and thank you to every person in my life that is giving me feedback, is there to support me, and is there to, I guess that's it. Give me feedback, support me, and love me, because I've got more people in my life that feel that way now than I ever have, and it feels pretty fucking good. So we will see you next time.